Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another episode of Life That Said Yes Conversations. Our guest is Bob Lehnberg, a BMC teacher and a Qigong teacher and a practitioner. Bob, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here with you, Ivan.
Great. I'm really happy that we're going to have a conversation about body-mind centering and embryology. And I would like us to start with you giving us a little introduction, how you got into movement practices and body-mind centering and Qigong, just a little info about yourself.
It's a never-ending process. Like a lot of people, like teaching or doing this work is my career. It's very different than most people, who get into a company and work until they're 55 or 60 or 65, and then they retire, and then they get a bunch of money and then go on vacations. That's an overgeneralization. Whereas, what I find is like Bonnie and other people who make this life their work. I mean, that's a discussion. Is it one, or can you separate the process from life and all of this? But as it is ongoing, there's always new insights or connections or revelations, and that's what keeps me going. And you can see it in Bonnie at 83. I don't know if you're doing her
Yes.
online, I imagine. She's still like uncoupling or clarifying and verbalizing incredible connections. And I went through, which I appreciate, and also my practice, is revealing as such too. And I got into body-mind centering in 1984 through yoga. So a short version of my story is like I was in science and I moved to this area to go to graduate school in anatomy or physiology or something. And I had a year, and during that year, I got introduced to theater, which I'd never done. And then some of the people in theater, so I did a play or two, and some people in theater says, "Oh, you seem to like this. You ought to take some basic classes, basic movement classes and basic voice classes." That's kind of, goes into whatever style I decide to do. So I took ballet and some couple semesters of voice at the university, and somebody in the ballet class said, "Oh, you should take yoga." I had heard of it, but oh yeah, yoga, that's good. So I took a yoga class from a BMC teacher, Mariska Bigos, and it was doing yoga through the glands, through the endocrine system. And I said, "Well, you can't do that." My science brain said, "Is like, oh, glands secrete hormones and, they make your life and this and that, but you can't like experience them or feel them or whatever." But I'll go anyway. And so 2 or 3 or 4 classes into it, the topic was adrenal glands, the adrenals. And so, I'm just doing the best I can to follow directions, and I think it was about sitting in verticality and being rooted. And all of a sudden I got this internal like experience of my adrenal glands, as the support and effortlessness for grounding and verticality. And it was like, oh, it's just, it was one of those many, many, many times this light bulb goes off. It's like, oh my gosh, this is real. And so there was something, this internal experience like sparked something that has kept me going. And since then, and like I just mentioned, it's like I've had many, 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 of those internal experiences which rise up to consciousness, and are those like bright moments, or those high frequency revelations, which are so like inspiring. And as a teacher, it's as a teacher for me, I've taught in a number of different arenas. I taught massage school, anatomy, physiology, massage school for about 10 years. And then I also took a yoga training, teacher training. So I learned that. It was integral yoga. I think that was 1996. I didn't go because I wanted to be a yoga teacher. I had my BMC background, and they were looking for somebody to teach embodied anatomy. So I applied, and they said, well, I mean, you have what we're looking for, but you also need to do the program. You know, you need to do the training. So I taught the anatomy and took the training at the same time, and so grateful that that was the avenue that I took, integral yoga, because it wasn't just about asana. Although I learned a 1 hour and 20-minute sequence with prompts and benefits and all that, but it was also about the chanting and the philosophy and the breathing and the meditation and all that. So I feel I got a pretty round perspective of yoga. And then I taught that for a while, and then I took a bunch of yoga classes, realizing that, oh my gosh, there's so much more than what I was taught in integral yoga.
Right.
You know, it's really just a scratch. So I taught that for a while, and then I went out west and to California to teach in a massage school there, and I got introduced to Qigong. And short version of a long story is I had heard of Qigong and heard of Qi and people describing Qi and all of this, and so, oh, that's pretty cool. Sounds like a great theory. And then so I took a couple of workshops, and then I was out practicing one evening after a workshop to integrate the work. And it was in the Redwoods in Northern California, my little stream. There's nobody around. I'm just practicing this particular form. And all of a sudden, I felt this connection, this bioelectromagnetism between my hand and my body, which is, you know, Qi. And it was like so many things came together at that one moment. It was like, oh, all the stories that people were telling, true. Not all the stories, but the theory and all of that, and the stories. And it was just like something in me opened up at that moment. And I literally laughed for like 10 minutes. I was just like beside myself, because it was like something like the doors of the universe opened to me. And there was so much, and I knew so little. And since that time, I've been, and that was 99. And ever since then, I've taken with a lot of Qigong teachers and Tai Chi, and so that is the flowing movements that I heard you just say. That is so inspiring and calming and transforming.
Can we stay a little bit with this situation where you were practicing in the Redwoods and actually for the first time had this felt sense of Qi? And what you mentioned before, when you had the felt sense of adrenal glands. I feel these moments where we actually feel this potential that we have inside us are these very deep and powerful moments where we can actually laugh from joy, because it's like a fountain of strength that comes from within. And we feel that a part of us has become alive, and that this part has always been inside of us. So in a way, it's a remembering, which is empowering.
Yeah. There's one more time which comes to me right now that I share often is when I was studying with Mariska, we were doing some of the developmental patterns. This is before I did my training. And we were doing something. I forget exactly what it was. It might have been the homolateral push of the uppers. It doesn't really matter. But I felt something in my back, back between my shoulder blade and my thoracic spine. And I'd never like felt it before. And it's like, what is that? And I asked the teacher, what is this? What's going on back there? And she just said, I don't know, Bob, what is that? And another light bulb went off. It's like the teacher, the quote unquote authority, which I thought at the time that's, the teacher didn't know, in that she like turned the question back on to me which gave me the responsibility, but also, like you just said, the power. And so that I what I used to say is, I am my own authority, but I think people have trouble with that word authority. So I generally just say it's, I am my reference, and that is, it's like, oh, and it's been an ongoing journey for me in that particular area, sorting that out and understanding it, experiencing it, feeling it. Like you say, is this work is about the feeling and the sensing and the feeling of it, and then bringing that, as Bonnie's book would say, into action, sensing, feeling, and action. And so it's this connection with of life that it sounds ridiculous to say this, but to realize that we are alive and in a body, for me, is now, of course, second nature. I don't question it. But before I started this, there was no connection at all. Before that adrenal moment, I mean, sure, I know when my muscles ached when I was a kid, or, whatever. But this is a whole different connection to being alive in this, in the body that we've created right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And this feeling of excitement in front of the mystery that we are. When we realize there is so many things inside of us that we actually don't know, and there's a ability to explore and to dive into. It seems at the same time overwhelming because it's so huge, but it's also this that we need to dive into it. We are invited, we are called to explore it.
Yeah. Yeah, we have the opportunity.
Right.
And I know that in the world, it's most people are engaged in the external world and making really cool things, robots and AI and building towers and all that. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff too. Um, and it's for some reason, this is just like clicked for me, and sounds like for you too, and maybe for other people listening, that it's like, wow, this inner journey and relationship we're relating on this, from our personal experiences. I continue to go back to, I continue to say, it's like, I might be my own reference, but it's also something much bigger than that. It's that duality of really teeny tiny of, speck of dust in the universe, to like, wow.
Yes.
Yeah. I was kind of informally teaching a little bit of Qigong a couple of days ago to some friends, and afterwards, it's one of the women said, that was really amazing. It's like you really invited us to feel what we're doing. And I mean, for me, that is my perspective. I think it's, if you're just going through the motions of whatever, Qigong or yoga or, gyrotonic, whatever, Pilates, that's great. You're getting movement and all of this, but it's like, yeah, where are you in this? So but there's like a personal relationship with vitality that is within the form that we have.
Right. Yeah, and I feel this is the moment where we actually make the practice our own, and we become the creators, in which this process emerges from within, instead of recreating and trying to duplicate an outside pattern that somebody else told us, oh, you should do this position or this position because it's good for this and this. But when we actually create the pattern from the inside out, then it becomes fully our own, I would say.
Yeah. It reminds me of, like, something like that. A teacher might say, oh, if you're in whatever, a warrior position, you need to move your knee here, or don't do it, don't do that, which, addresses the form. And I think that can be helpful, you know, as a stage, just to start to, oh, when my knee is here, I'm not feeling this. When my knee is here, I am feeling that. So that can be helpful. Somebody, I forget who this was. Somebody said, and I believe this, you know, if I could pick my teachers, what are the two most important teachers that have guided you? And it would be earth and space, like gravity and levity. If we connect, you know, if I can be sensitive to those two, or, you know, in the world of Qigong, it's going to be the yin and the yang. If when I can connect and have relationships to those two energies that I am in between, and to find how they transform to one another through movement, through stillness and movement and consciousness, then that opens up a huge, a very big world. So in my practice, and I still take classes on occasion, and or learn from people, and I still integrate it into the sensation of density and or of condensing and expanding, or density and spaciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, in my own experience, this polarity is always dancing together, condensing, expanding. And can we stay a little bit with this concept of yin and yang, which is such an like a universal concept, and everybody's heard of it? How do you see this concept manifesting in the human body and in the human movement?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing, if we look at form, you know, let's say yin is going to be lower, yang is going to be higher. Yin is going to be to the front, yang is going to be to the back. Some people say yin is on the left, yang is on the right. Yeah, I don't know about that one yet. So those are static. But yin and yang, I think they're dynamic. You know, if you look at some of the wheels, they're always turning, you know, the yin yang sign, they're, you know, if the maker has the graphics, they can make it spin. You know, otherwise it's just a static image. And so for me, yin and yang are, you know, flowing forward, back, left, right, and up and down. And so for me, it's connecting with that flow. Like even just for me, shifting weight is one of the most pleasurable activities that I can engage in, particularly left and right, but also forward and back, which leads to up and down. So for me, and I'm a fairly expansive person just by nature of my body and where I am right now. So coming more, which would be more yang, expansive, thought, spark. Whereas the yin is the quieting. The yin is the descent. The yin is the ground. The yin is the root. And so for me, my practice, is consciously to do that. And I need to do that again and again and again. To continue to remind myself in the body, on the planet, dense. You know, the density of the body. And so playing with that, and how that can rise and lower and descend or sink. One of my teachers a long time ago, he said, you know, you need to get the good sink to get the good rise. So the more you sink, the more you are able to rise. And the more you are able to ground, the more you are able to, you know, expand and fly. Or so yang would be the nervous system, yin, the internal system, the belly, front, the guts, ectoderm, yang, endoderm, yin, mesoderm is the combination. It's for me, it's the mixing and the vitality that comes through the yin and yang, the mesoderm, the muscles, the bones, blood, connective tissue.
Would you say that the yin and yang polarities are already embodied in the very beginning by the egg and the sperm?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. That's what just blew through when I was speaking, just blew through my awareness, and I missed it. So thanks for bringing that up.
It was a sperm thought.
It was a sperm, and it was going. Yeah, did bypass go, did not collect $100 or $200, whatever. Yeah. So with this, from emptiness, Wuji, which in BMC is vibration, before embodiment, before coming into physicality. In the Qigong Tai Chi world, in Wuji, emptiness, and then from emptiness separated itself into yin and yang, which in physicality is the egg and the sperm. They come together in conception, and you get all this development. And in formation, in forming, and in this perspective, it's through consciousness. Our consciousness created the form, created the physicality in the body. So we don't ever lose anything. So we never lose that state of emptiness. We never lose the state of yin, of egg and sperm, of yin and yang, but they just continue to mix and become more complex. But we forget. So, very simply, I heard this saying recently, stillness is the new thinking. Everybody's got to make something up to, keep things current. And so stillness is simply the, in looking at embryology and in the body-mind centering, stillness is simply the embodiment of the egg, of the ovum. And then the movement in the sperm energy, yang, incites the stillness into creation. It takes the both.
Right.
And I also take this into, I'm a little preoccupied, not at this moment, but apparently at this moment, kind of right now, is in the nervous system and attention and intention. And I mean, I just got this image of, being in Wuji in the egg. And I don't want to say that egg is Wuji, because egg is already something. So egg being yin, sperm being yang, it's like both of the energies can be strong. So it's not like a pulley. We have strong yang and weak yin, or weak yin, strong yang, but they're both separate energies that are in relationship with one another.
I think that's very important, because recently I had a conversation with a friend of mine about these energies.
Yeah.
And somehow he was associating the yin energy, the female polarity, as weakness and passivity. So like it wasn't a polarity that was working together, but it was more one pole is good and the other one represents, the qualities which are not good in us, instead of, yang being the activity and the yin being this deep receptiveness, deep listening, deep coming into contact with self.
Yeah. I think that probably is not an uncommon view, that dark is bad, quiet is bad. Maybe not bad, but is not as desirable as being active and creative and moving, making something happen all the time.
Right. Which is also a mirror image of the society, which constantly incites productivity and movement and outwards action.
Yeah.
As somehow more valuable than inside being.
Yeah. The egg is is more process oriented. Humankind is about, we build rockets. I mean, that's a quintessential form of yang, and we just go up into space, and overcome all sense of gravity and Earth. It's a fine thing. I'm all for exploration. However, another way to look at it is, just it could be as simple as how do we, if we're laying on the floor, how we get up from the floor to standing. I mean, that's a yang expression. But then it's like, then how do we get back down to the floor,
Right.
and then back up? And how do we make it a process or an event or an activity that we engage ourselves in, so that we, really get to know that process, so that as we go higher, we can still come back down, but not forsake the earth. It's like the paradox. The paradox is one of them is, we put all this time and money into rockets and space travel, this extreme yang, to explore other Earths, and to have stations on other planets like the moon or Mars. And I mean, the pictures I've seen, there's not a whole lot there. But we want to like put a place there and make generations and families, and in the far future. And the paradox is like, what is more beautiful than the earth?
Right.
Why do we want to leave this and take all the money that we could spend, cultivating this garden, instead of like using it up into creating a new one? However, I think that's just part of human nature.
Right.
And so that is to be accepted as well. It's just not my path.
Right. Considering all this that you now said, then there is a need to come back to the contact with the earth first, because, like you said in the beginning, we need this rooting down to have this levity up, and we need deep contact with this planet if we are ever thinking of exploring any other planet.
Yeah, and it will color how we explore other planets.
Exactly. After the deep contact with the Earth as a planet, as a living organism, that we would approach other planets as living organisms, instead of, just locations that we can use for something.
Yeah. What minerals are on this asteroid or meteorite that we can mine?
Exactly. Because I feel that's colonizing mentality, which only takes.
Yeah.
And has this general sense of planets not being living beings.
And even this one.
Yeah, even this one. Yeah. Starting with this one. And that's why I feel this work that we do through body-mind centering, it's so enriching and important, because it reminds us of life.
Yeah.
What is matter imbued with life, matter imbued with consciousness. When we see that, when we start experiencing that inside of ourselves, in the living tissue, in the cells, then the whole worldview starts changing.
Yeah, or even how consciousness created form. That one took me a long time to wrap my head around, because I thought it was always, oh, we have this body and consciousness arose out of this collection of cells. I don't think it's wrong. I don't think that's right. But looking at embryology and certain perspectives of embryology is like, consciousness manifested egg and sperm. Consciousness manifested the dynamics of spatial position and development.
Right.
And I'm not sure that's right or wrong, but I do believe that there's a relationship between those two perspectives. I generally, right now, I'm in like, consciousness has created form. And taking that assumption is that with embryology, is like, generally embryology is thought of to be from conception to the first 8 weeks in utero, until all the organ systems develop. Some might extend it to 10 weeks. But also, as embryology is a process of creation, of coming into form, we are still in that process of coming into form.
Right.
And I imagine Steve Paxton passed, and he was a dancer, co-created contact improvisation, and there was a relationship between him and body-mind centering and in bringing the work together. And one thing that he said in an interview that I saw recently is like he dances to finish. He said something to the effect of like he dances to finish his movement development. So it's just like just because you can stand up and walk, maybe run, swing a bat or tennis racket or throw a ball, it doesn't mean that your movement is fully developed. There's more to go, as manifested, as exemplified by Steve. And for me, it's like it's in a way it's the same. We can stop anytime we want, and most of us have, and I know I have in certain areas. But there's other areas that I can choose to continue to develop, and that is what the movement practices are for me, and the qigong, and how the embryology comes in to inform my qigong, and also how the practices of qigong, from some things that I've learned, and these have been developed hundreds, 1,000, 15, 1,800 years ago, include principles of embryology, without even knowing embryology, cognitively, but intuitively, it's just known.
Right.
And manifested. And so what the body-mind centering does, one thing, we could look at it so many different ways, but body-mind centering is an embodied language and an embodied vocabulary, so that we can use words like, well, yield or reach or pull, things like that. It's like, oh, I know what those are. I can see them in the dictionary, and they have. But when you experience them on a cellular level and then have that cellular experience come up to consciousness, it gives a whole different meaning or a whole different relationship or understanding of these very simple terms. And where was I going with this one? Oh, that body-mind centering, brings language forward in this way so that certain principles or understandings or activities or investigations, explorations can be more directed and experienced on a different level. The word faster or more quickly wants to come up, but it's not quite that. It's more directed, I would say. So instead of studying something for 10 years, a yoga or a qigong or tai chi, what body mind centering has done for me is it's closed loops a little bit more directly, closed understandings and experiences a little bit more directly, simultaneously opening others to questions.
Right.
In a way, I see BMC, I don't know, it's necessary or it's a need, but it also isn't. I know it's a gift, I mean, it's kind of a gift if you can afford the time and the energy and the, and the schedule to, be a part of it. But it's also that part, for me, it's that part of life that's, it's like art. It's in a way, I mean, we can look at BMC in so many different ways, but it's kind of like the art of living, and the art of living and developing, of growing up.
And when you said that the Tai Chi and Qigong old masters who came up with these practices, and I would say the same for yoga in a way, they had an intuitive knowledge of human embryology and how we came into form. How do you see this process that this knowledge comes up intuitively from the body intelligence?
Yeah, two things occur to me. One is when yoga was quote unquote started, or qigong or Daoyin started thousands of years ago, they didn't, there weren't all these distractions, these electrical distractions, lights, computers. It was people in nature.
Right.
That's all, with 24 hours each day. And I think most of these things arose spontaneously, which I'll get to in a minute. And then they were consolidated into form, and then it's passed on through form, which is, you know,
A reverse process.
it's a reverse process, and hopefully that the form can help us come back to, you know, the vitality and the experience within it. And so something that Kathleen said that I already expressed as a student, said, wow, you're really leading us to feeling, the feeling state, is I've studied a lot of forms, and some of them, and so my body mind centering training and some of my Qigong teachers is, it's not about the visualization, although that is a very powerful skill and maybe a stepping stone, but it's the feeling state. And I think for me, it goes beyond the feeling state. You know, the feeling state is still a stage, very important to the simply being stage when there, anyway. So, and I was just experiencing this last night, knowing a bunch of forms, just because that's what I've put my attention onto in, you know, a lot of my life. And so I've learned a few, and I've forgotten quite a few, quote unquote forgotten. And so for me, it's looking, how do all these different forms from different systems relate to one another? It's not that they're totally disparate, but they're just, in a sense, choosing a certain slice of movement possibility. So what my practice is now, in what I teach in some classes, is a little bit of form. But what I practice is, okay, how do these forms morph, change from one into the other? And that would be what some would consider the creative process of not knowing where we're going, but getting there. The paradox is not knowing where we're going, but knowing where we are going to in the natural state, without the cognition, without the, you know, the gray matter directing. And that is what it's something called spontaneous Qigong is the American word, and I forgot the Chinese term for it, but it's when the body is speaking, when the qi is flowing and the body is moving, according to that. Some say, oh, that's the highest, that's the most advanced form of Qigong. I don't know. But I do believe it is where, you know, it's where the subconscious flows to release the blocks of our being, you know, and to be more and more fully present. More and more fully present or connected. You know, there is a term in Qigong, it's called Song, S-O-N-G, Song, which in a very simple definition means to relax, but it's much more than that. You could look at Song as being just engaging the amount of energy required to do the task at hand. Could be standing. If you're standing, no more energy than what it takes to be in that verticality. If you used any less, you'd start to sag. If you used any more, you'd start to come into tension. Another way to look at Song is it's about relationship. So that when all of the cells are being themselves and fully in themselves and in relationship to one another, one is not working not working, it's not holding any tension as everyone else is doing their part. In BMC, we could look at this as yield or yielding. I'm not sure they're exactly the same, but they're very, very close. And so it's like being in a state of Sung in relationship to Earth and space, heavens, if you will. And that, and letting go into that, trusting and yielding into that is a state which is, you know, it's bliss. For me, it's bliss. And so I think that 100,000 or so years ago, this was a natural state. And I don't mean to say that living back then was easy. No way. You still had the elements, and all that stuff, but there was a different connection to nature, and the Taoists are going to use nature as our teacher. We are the little, our body is the little embodiment of the gross nature outside of us, and outside is the great manifestation of that within us. My very simplistic understanding.
Yeah, when you were talking about song, the word that came to me was also surrender. Somehow I feel that we need this element of yield or surrender where we are not directing anymore from the nervous system in a way, but opening up to this life force which is flowing through us and is us, but it's also much greater than us. Like you said, being really tiny and feeling the big force, and then letting this force move us. And I feel this force it's intelligent. It's very organic, and when it starts flowing through the inner channels and the pathways, it's also starts melting the blocks and guiding, and in a way this feeling of bliss that you mentioned, I feel it's like it's like a reward of letting go into this process.
Yeah. And something that just came to my mind as you were speaking is it's a practice. It's a practice of directed consciousness. And if I just go along my merry way as Bob, and I didn't have any of these practices, or, I'm just like going in, one of the sheep, so to speak. I'm just like flowing along and in a way having life happen to me. I'm engaged with life, but it's happening. Okay. That's some people's choices, and it was certainly mine for a while, and I default to it sometimes. But a regular practice, I would say daily, a regular practice of directed consciousness is what changes our experience. It's what changes the form. And I think this is a clear example. And I think anyone who has a regular yoga or Qigong or Tai Chi or, whatever sort of movement practice, even gardening practice maybe, but we'll keep it with the body-mind practices for now, is that regular practice and grounding in clarity, or at least seeking clarity. We might not find it, but seeking clarity, just that activity and that intention is what creates form or recreates form. So there, consciousness does create form. Very clear to me. Thank you for allowing that to come in. Yeah. And, I'll slip back into Bobness, and then I'll practice, and then I'll, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, so to speak. I mean, I'm not enlightened and I'm not without fault, but it's like this regular practice, which is, and what I choose to practice gradually changes over time.
Right.
Is what's going to, change my perception, how I relate with one another. And I think the other thing is, an embryological principle is that we create our form, we grow into that form, and then we let go of that form, or that form collapses, or we create another form or find another form in which to continue our growth. And so we choose the practices, whether it's a particular Qigong practice, whether it's a particular body-mind centering exercise or experience or activity. We practice it for a while, yoga, practice certain ones for a while, and then it's like, and then transitioning or changing the form for continued growth of consciousness and experience and relationship. And so that is, I think that's where form and consciousness and form continue that dance. If that makes any sense. Did that make sense?
Yes, of course. And it allows the practice to remain fresh, and not to get stuck into any particular loop or in any particular form. I really enjoy that you mentioned this daily practice, and that was one of my points here for today's talk was this daily practice and study as a foundation, as you said on your website, foundation for healing, growth, and transformation. And Bonnie often says, like, how interested are you to keep coming back to these practices? And we are constantly new. The practice that I do one day will be different the other day. And just like to approach it in this fresh way and to approach myself as I'm always fresh, I think that is a great gift. And that is one of the lessons from embryology, that we are never this fixed entity. We start as this process, and this process is ever going and ever changing, and it doesn't end when we become, a formed adult human being, but this flow is constant.
Mm.
Like the flow of chi is also, it's never static. It's always creating and recreating.
And there's also something, I got this from Buddhism, is that the underneath it there is an unchangeable.
Right.
And that would
the Wu Ji.
the Wu Ji, yeah, is the emptiness or the unchangeable, and that is always with us, and we forget that. I do.
Yes, yeah, I guess we all do.
Yeah.
I feel we forget because of the conditioning that we were brought up in, where this awareness of the basic vibration is not given to us from birth in our culture, in society, but we need to find it afterwards if we set out on a quest. But it's not something we are born into, let's say, in these societies nowadays. Maybe sometime before it was a natural knowledge that was transmitted and cultivated in a way.
Well, we've created this world which is so externally stimulating. It's just unbelievably, it's pretty fascinating, and I'm certainly a part of it. And I mean, and even our senses are biased towards that, visually or auditorily. And some years ago, when I was practicing to before teaching a course series, I went out and I would go out into the woods, in nature, and do whatever practice was up at that time. And there's a, I mean, I'll make this short, but I practice, so I'm standing, practicing breathing and stillness. And then some of it I'm taking from body-mind centering, some of it I'm taking from Qigong and practices and breathing in my center. I breathe up to my skin, open the pores of my skin, breathe beyond the pores of my skin to close, to further out, to as far out as my consciousness can hold. That expansive space in the 3 dimensions. And I don't know, this is maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And I arrived at a state which was like there was only one. And it's easy to say, oh, I know that state. But this was like this experience, and I would put a little marker on it. Maybe this is approaching Wuji or emptiness or all, that I didn't exist. There was no me and you. And I know the irony, paradox is that when I notice it, I'm out of it. Yeah. But when I'm there, it was a state of joy, of bliss. I mean, I wasn't smiling or laughing. I was just like expanded glee, if glee could be a word. And then I brought it, and then it came back in faster than I expanded, because thinking is a condensing process. Right. Even that awareness brought it in, but I had that imprint. That's one of those things that happens on a cellular level before it comes to the cortex in consciousness. And I really wanted to transmit that in class. And all I could do was like to be in it. And you can't make anybody go there. The process of teaching is imbuing the space with possibility.
Right. That's
And yeah, but I mean, and that was, I don't know, 5 years, that was before COVID. And it's still, that's one of those experiences that will stay with me,
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these experiences are so powerful. They don't last, they don't have to last long in the linear time, but in the non-linear spiralic time, they're eternity in a way, and they make such a strong imprint. And I also understand the desire to transmit that to other people, and of course to students. And then this realization that like you can imbue the space with that, but you cannot give it to anybody, because it's an intrinsic part of a personal search, and it didn't come out of nothing for you. It came as a sequence of all the practices and life before, and then it manifested as a sort of a gift, and really proving that through our body we have this doorway into this infinite realm, and this immense wisdom, but it's an individual search for it. Nobody can give it to us. It's such a personal and intimate process.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate what you said. It's not about linear time, because that particular moment and other moments, they don't last that long. I mean, some of them do linger or have echoes. I mean, in fact, this has echoes for me right now, but the experience, it's these intense experiences. I'm not sure I have the ability to hold them for very long at that level, in linear time, but in spiralic time, as you said, and it's I wasn't looking for it, but I like prepared the ground through previous explorations in that moment, whatever it was, for something to come in, something new to be experienced. Maybe that is like, there's something that Jaap van der Wal, he's an embryologist, has said is like, the embryo knows where it's going.
Right.
And at first I didn't get what he's talking about. I'm not sure I know exactly what that is now, but I have an idea, like, we know where we're going even though we haven't been there. And there's something in our being,
Right,
that knows this truth. And like you said, what Bonnie says is like, how curious are you? And apparently this small group of people, me and you and who's ever listening and others, are curious enough to put our life and time energy into, this process. And, for me, like this, and it is a spiral, like that you said, spiralic time, because a spiral is like a circle that's expanded like a coil. And on every part of the coil, if we're at one place and have a certain level of experience and time and age and whatever, then as it goes around another 360 degrees, it's at a different frequency, a different level. And it's like, yeah, we're just like going around this spiral of being.
amazing. And I would like to stay a little bit with the spiral,
Hmm.
because also a sentence that I read on your website is, I love that movement of the body can be seen as the expression of our DNA.
Hmm.
And DNA is also like a spiral. And when you said this sentence that the embryo knows where it's growing, for me it's immediately this image of a spiral. of a spiral process, which is kind of like has this intelligence to know where it's going. And just one anecdote I would like to tell you. I remember a class that we did on the embryology of the blood and heart. And we started with this blood islands and how they form on the outside. And then all this process of forming of our circulatory system and the heart. I remember at one point while we were doing that, we were being guided. The whole room just started spinning in spirals. Like those dervish dances.
Wow.
And I don't know, it was something about this embodiment that made the whole room spin in spirals. And at one point, I just became aware of that and just soaked it in. And it was like this incredible process, like how these embryological processes are also spirals. They always come in some sort of a spiral.
Mm, mm. Wow. That's a beautiful image.
Yeah,
Beautiful to hear that. And it's one thing to practice on our own, and it's another thing to be in a room with people
right.
doing the same thing. And that's what motivates me to, continue to teach, in the programs, because it's there's so much energy with those many live beings. I don't consider myself a teacher. I'm more of a focalizer or a focalizer, you know.
Vocalizer.
Yeah, I like that term. It's the best one I can come up with because it's a back and forth, with the students. And yeah, I might be teaching some things. I'm not sure what that would entail, but focalizer. So we're all in this. And I'll get back to spirals in a minute. Is you know, as they say, you're in a BMC class when the leader, the teacher, or whatever is giving the same. Everyone's hearing the same words, and everyone's doing something different.
Right, right, right.
I mean, even if it is spiraling, but um, yeah, organized chaos. It's fun. It's fun. And as far as DNA, it's like, I mean, spirals are all in the body, all the way from, the proteins that make up the muscles to the collagen that makes up the connective tissue and elastin. And if you look at them, under a microscope, they're spiraling. Flagella and cilia are not just whipping back and forth, but they're spiraling a little bit. They finally got the science of seeing a sperm in the flagella, the tail. It used to be the thought was that it just whipped back and forth. It doesn't. It spirals around like a corkscrew. And that's how the sperm can find itself going more linearly than back and forth. And that is one thing that I, as far as like manifesting spirals, it's like the only linear thing, linear is when we build buildings, straight lines are what we see mostly, because they take the least amount of energy, and they're most, to make from a construction. But we're not straight at all. In fact, we're not even flat. Arguably, one of the most unnatural things is a flat floor, like concrete, because we're always on like grass or sticks or leaves or things, and maybe even there's always some unevenness. And so one thing I really appreciate about Qigong is the spiralic underpinning. This, that's one of the basic principles and of spirals and how we get this through the whole body. And I was some while ago I was showing one form that I do, one form of something called the 5 animal frolics. I was showing it to somebody who knew a lot of Qigong. And I was just showing her just some of the movements. And she just said, "Oh, very old form." And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" She said, "Because everything's more straight, more linear. And as the forms developed, there became more of an incorporation of the sporadic motions and more and more." So I just thought that was fascinating. Oh. And the other thing is that however I learned that form, either how it was demonstrated or how I learned it or how I demonstrated it at the time was more linear, as opposed to like finding the subtle, the smaller internal spirals and curves and arcs that are inherent to it. But I was at that time not able to pick that up. That was one of the first forms that I learned. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing, and it shows how we progress in our own practice through levels of subtlety.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like just the very word qigong, I like the second part of this word gong, which is cultivation and developing of relationship and practice, and it just somehow it points to this idea of a process that
Mm.
can be very coarse, but it can be get more and more subtle and subtle, more subtle and more subtle into infinity.
Yeah. I mean, one of the dichotomies is stillness and movement. And one way to look at it is like the stiller you are, the more chi can move. Whereas the more external movement you have, it's the less you're in contact with chi. And let me rephrase that. The stiller you are, the more direct connection you have with chi. But more the movement, gross physical movement you have, the less your direct connection with chi. That we could discuss that as I see it in body mind centering. And one way to look at the nervous system, the autonomic system, and the somatic system being with the muscles, quite simplistically, the autonomic being underneath that, is the parasympathetic is the ground, most fully experienced perhaps in stillness. And then you have awareness, which is the autonomic, system of like, oh, I'm aware of my knee, I'm aware of my belly, I'm aware of, this itch on my skin, or whatever it is, or I'm aware of the weight passing through my body. But then when that comes into movement, then the soma, the muscles, the volitional muscles start to come into play. And I think that what many people do is they're just in the form, the skeletal muscular form of things, without having the fluidity underneath in the autonomic system. And so one thing that I always bring in, because I feel that this is just part of my practice, is like, where is the fluidity, the fluid autonomic underpinning of somatic movement? And this, for me, is what makes the movement alive. Yeah, because we had the autonomic system before the somatic system.
Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate this conversation and your depth and knowledge. And yeah, I have a feeling we could talk for hours.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've enjoyed our conversation and really appreciate your desire, in your path and connecting with people and putting it out. And it's conversations like this, even though we might not be moving in a studio, I'm still moving. I notice you moving, integrating the words, and then allowing, just being either reminded or making new connections, which is, for me, it provides so much joy.
Yes.
So much like, yes, just a little bright in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I do it. That's why I do it, and it's the connection and yeah, like you said,
Yeah.
joy to speak about these subjects, which I find extremely important, and bringing them into the public discourse in a way, with only one intention, really, to spark to spark the curiosity.
Yeah. I find that, it's education. I think a big step is like it's education as to what somatic experiencing or somatic education is. And one thing that I hold is that as people get more, I don't know, distracted or preoccupied with the external world, then that will be, then there will be it's not a recoil, but it's not backlash, but a reversal or a reattunement into like the internal experience, if that makes any sense. And I think the one thing about it is it is it takes being present, and we're not used to. I think the average person isn't attuned to a high level of presence, and so for me, when I teach beginners or something, I need to keep reminding myself of that. Like, don't take them to the depths of the ocean, as I understand it. Take them in and start to, touch the water. What's the
Mhm.
water feel like? And
Mhm.
hopefully that little wetness will whet their appetite to develop more. And I know people are out there. I know it. It's just making it available. So that keeps me going.
Right, right.
Yeah, and conversations like this, of course.